and welcome to another episode of For the Love of Marketing. Today, I'm delighted to have Matt Essam with me, who's the founder of Creative Life, a fantastic business that helps top creative agencies to ultimately deliver growth and focus on the business side, deliver business results, so as they can spend their time focusing on what they're good at, which is the creative side. But what we're going to talk about, Matt, today is really how to grow a business, how to scale a business, right? And how to focus on the right things to do that, which of course applies to any service-based business. But before we get into that, welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Simon.
That's all right. So you're over in New Zealand and I'm over in the UK. So we're doing this opposite ends of the clock at the moment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just out here visiting some family that I've not seen since before lockdown. So unfortunately, that's the price you have to pay when you run your own business, getting up at silly hours to keep things moving forwards.
Well, that and when someone lives in New Zealand, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I know a few people who've got family in New Zealand and Australia. They really don't see each other that often. So once every few years isn't too bad, I think, to be honest.
Yeah.
Anyway, good. So let's get stuck into it. So I think one of the things that that we were chatting about the other day was the sort of service versus services versus benefits, I suppose, right? So when you're trying to sell a product, where should you be focusing your message, right? You have a set of services, obviously you want to talk about those, but do people really want to hear about that, or where's the benefit? What's relevant to the audience you're talking to? What's the journey that a buyer goes through, and how can you capitalize on that? So tell me, when you're helping these businesses to scale and focus on improving their commercial angle, where do you begin?
So we actually look at currently where they are in their life cycle, I suppose, and we break our strategies down into three key parts. There's the foundational element, there's a growth element, and then there's what we kind of call impact element. And we're kind of focusing predominantly on three key areas of the business. So over the last 5 or 6 years, we've kind of experimented with lots of different strategies and lots of different things. And we found that really there's only three things that shift the needle specifically for creative agencies. But like you said at the beginning, I think this applies to a lot of service-based businesses. So the first one is their ability to differentiate themselves from the competition. So that's really the key factor that determines kind of how much money they can charge, how they're kind of perceived by their clients, and really avoiding that race to the bottom. So that's kind of pillar number one. Pillar number two is their ability to effectively and consistently communicate the value of those services to their ideal clients. And so kind of on the flip side, what we typically see is a lot of inconsistency, because I think we all know as business owners, what happens is like when you win new clients, you get sucked into doing the work and delivering the projects. And then usually your marketing and your sales takes a little bit of a hit. And then you kind of finish those projects and you go, oh crap, like where's the next project going to come from? And so then you go out and you start doing your marketing and stuff again. And so that creates this kind of cycle of feast and famine a lot of the time for service-based businesses and for us creative agencies. So that's the second pillar, is like, how do we consistently and effectively communicate the value so that we don't have that cycle, and also so that we can actually price our services in the way that we want them to, and that we're being treated by our clients as a kind of expert and as a guide rather than just like a worker. And then the final thing is, if you do those first two things really well, what tends to happen is you have more clients than you can handle. And so that leads us to our third problem, which is how do we grow and scale without just kind of throwing more people at the problem? And essentially what we look at there is how do we essentially productize the service so that our clients are able to get results for their clients predictably and consistently. And so they can build systems and processes around those services, and they can get people in and actually scale that business without investing more time, money, and energy and kind of team. And they can actually do it in a way that kind of takes them out of the business. So they're the kind of three core elements. And I think what you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast was really around this concept of like services versus symptoms, or services versus solutions. And that kind of falls into our second pillar, which is how you communicate with your ideal clients.
Yeah, good. Well, let's expand on that a little bit then, because I think in my career I've often talked about features versus benefits, which is a very similar discussion, and I think many marketers, many listeners will be familiar with that phrase. I think I still see many businesses getting too focused on talking about what their product or their service specifically does, what it is. Because often it's something you're very proud of and you think it's very complex. Perhaps you need to talk about it, you need to shout about a new feature that's come out, and not to say that that's wrong in any way, but if that is exciting to you internally within a business, it may be utterly dull and irrelevant to the person you're talking to. So when you talk about services versus symptoms and solutions, what advice would you give to someone on making sure you get that messaging right?
Well, I think the first bit of advice I always give to people is actually quite counterintuitive, and often people think I'm a bit crazy, because one of the first things I say to people is stop talking about your services,
Mm-hmm.
right? Stop going out on your website and, you go on to an agency's website and we are a brand agency. We have our 5-step brand process, blah, 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 blah. And that seems like a logical thing to do, right? We're a brand agency. Let's talk about how we help people with our branding. The problem is the only message the only people that is resonating with that message is people at what we call stage 4 of the decision-making process. So just to give people some context, we all go through, as humans, we go through a process when we come to make a kind of informed buying decision. So I'm not talking about like going down the shops and buying yourself a new pair of jeans. I'm talking about like a considered purchase. We'll all go through these different stages, and stage 4 is really where we're at that point where we kind of know what we want and we're out in the market and we're comparing suppliers. We're on Amazon, we're reading reviews, we're talking to friends. Hey, have you ever worked with these people before? We're trying to get that kind of validation that this is the right supplier. And predominantly we're comparing on 3 factors. How much does it cost in relation to the other kind of products and services in the market? How quickly can I get it? And is it any good? Like, will it actually work? Mm-hmm. And so it seems like a really logical thing to put on your website. We build brands and we help people with this thing. But the problem is you're attracting stage 4 buyers, and stage 4 buyers are usually in that good, fast, cheap triangle. They want things at a reasonable price. They want it as quickly as possible, and they want it to be good quality. And so what tends to happen is these agencies are kind of trying to move those things around. Like, really, we're going to pride ourselves on our level of service. We're going to pride ourselves on the projects we've worked on before and the fact that we deliver them on time and all of these things that people talk about. But there's only a certain amount of variables that you can move. And so your messaging around your services is attracting stage 4 buyers who are very price sensitive. And it's also one of the most competitive places in the market. So if you imagine, I mean, you don't even have to imagine, you can go on social media and you look on LinkedIn or something, you see a post that says, hey, we're thinking about rebranding our company. Does anyone have any recommendations? And within about 10 minutes, there's 50 comments under that post, right? So it's one of the most competitive, one of the most crowded parts of the market. And the criteria that people are using are really around time, price, and quality. So the reason I say that is because I actually think that stage 4 buyers are the worst kind of buyers to attract with your marketing.
That's interesting. So why don't we take a step back there and just talk through the stages? So you mentioned the 6 stages, and stage 4, as you say, bottom, and you don't want to get into this. I think you mentioned already, race to the bottom on pricing, right? It's not a healthy place to be with your business, generally speaking. So if we want to attract people at the top of that journey, what are those stages? I'm hoping you know them off the top of your head.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. The first stage is where we're kind of like unaware that there's a problem, or we're satisfied with the current solution we have. So I always use the example, I bought a new laptop recently. Well, I was at stage 1 when I had my previous laptop. So if someone had come to try to sell me a laptop, I probably wouldn't be very interested, right? I'm like, I've got a laptop already. It works fine. It meets my needs. Mm-hmm. Then what happens is we either become aware of something that our current solution doesn't provide us, So this kind of works when a new phone comes out, like, oh, look at this new camera, look at this new thing. You're like, oh, I haven't got that. And so you move to stage 2, where you become aware there's kind of a gap, or something happens where there's like a problem with your current solution and you become dissatisfied with it. So in my case, what was happening was I was running these coaching calls for our clients, and because it was only a MacBook Air and I had my fancy camera set up like I've got now and all these switches and these things, it wasn't coping very well. So it kept crashing, and this happened on several occasions. And so then I moved from stage 1, where I was like, I'm fine, I don't have a problem, to stage 2, where I'm like, actually, there's a problem here. Like, I'm not satisfied anymore. So stage 2 is about being aware of the problem, but you're not yet aware of the solution. And often we spend quite a lot of time between stage 2 and stage 3. And stage 3 is when we actually decide that we're going to take action and go and find the solution. And probably everybody listening has got something in their life right now where they're kind of between stage 2 and 3. Like, they know it's a problem, it's pretty annoying, but they haven't yet committed fully, kind of that internal thing that we do as humans where we're like, this is enough, I'm sick of this, I'm going to go and do something about it, right? And they go out and we say, right, we're going to make that decision. So that's the third stage, is where we actually make that decision. And then we quickly move, once we've made that decision, we quickly move to stage 4, which is what we've been talking about just now, which is where we're actually going out into the market and kind of searching for the solution. We're kind of looking for what do I do about this thing? And often, because we've, between kind of stage 3 and 4, because we've decided we're going to do something about it, but we're kind of assessing our options, we will do a lot of research ourselves. And what will often happen is we'll actually come to a conclusion ourselves through that research. So we're researching the product, like what's the best thing to buy. So, right, should I go with Apple again, or should I buy a different computer? Or maybe I don't need to buy a new computer. Maybe I actually just need to replace the graphics card or something. And I'm kind of searching for those solutions. And then once I kind of realize, right, I think I'm going to do this, then that's when we move to stage 5, where we actually go and make that purchase. And then stage 6 is kind of where we review that purchase and kind of say, we've used it for a bit. Was this definitely the best option? Is this working how I expected it to work?
Good. Okay. So if we don't want to convert people, or if we don't want to go and get our message out to people at stage 4, which stage do we want to get our message to people?
So ideally stage 1 and 2. So 1 is a little bit harder because often people are a little bit more closed to something changing or something different if they're already kind of happy with what they've got. So stage 1 buyers who are not aware there's a problem, that's kind of more where like the innovation comes in. People weren't sitting around thinking, I really need an iPod. Like, oh, it really annoys me that like I don't have this device that fits 10,000 songs in my pocket. Like, they weren't thinking about that. It was only when someone created that and showed them what was possible that they went, well, that's pretty cool. I can't do that at the moment. So that's kind of more on the kind of innovation side of things, I suppose. The ideal place for me and what we advise our clients is stage 2. And the reason that stage 2 is so powerful is because they're already aware of a pain. There's already like a niggle there. There's something that they're dissatisfied with. And usually if you can articulate that in a way that resonates with how they're experiencing that pain, you will get people's attention very quickly. Right. And so the metaphor that I use is the difference between an eye test and glasses. So let's imagine that all of a sudden you've started to have some quite bad headaches, right? You're not really sure why you're having headaches, but it's starting to become pretty annoying, pretty painful. If you walked past a billboard that said, hey, new glasses from Specsavers, 20% off, you're probably not going to pay that advert much attention, right? Because it's like, well, it doesn't really apply to me, because what you know is you're having headaches. Whereas if you saw an advert that said, have you recently started getting headaches and you're experiencing X, Y, and Z, take our test and we'll tell you exactly why they're happening in less than 10 minutes. That's going to be something that you're going to jump on really quickly, because it talks to the exact experience that you're having, the exact symptoms that you're having in that moment in time. And the beauty of that stage is that if you can diagnose that problem as a service provider, as a creative expert, if you can diagnose that problem and show them something that they weren't fully aware of, then they will consciously or subconsciously credit you as being the expert and being the
Yeah.
guide. They will be willing to go with you on that journey through stage 3, through stage 4, look at the options that you recommend rather than them kind of trying to come to those conclusions themselves, and often, as we know, misdiagnosing.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. There's a couple of things that I picked up on there as you were talking. So one of those, that point around, yeah, are you experiencing headaches? It's fantastic, and I think, for me, one thing I often talk to businesses about is about understanding your audience, and using the data that you have and the data that's available in the market to construct those stories. So as we talk about benefits over features. As you say, it's not just, hey, look, we sell glasses. It's, what's the problem that you've specifically got and how do we solve that problem for you? And almost always there's a way to find that out with either customer interviews or data that you gather on a purchase, or what's going on in the market, or your historical data. There's lots and lots of different ways to get those stories. But being able to get in there to, we know there are 10 things or 20 things that we solve with our products, and we need to go to those people when they're suffering from that problem in that right place and get in front of them and talk to them about why we're the solution for that. I think that's one. The other thing is, as you said, I think the beginning, the stage 1 here can be hard because these people aren't looking for anything. They don't even know there's a problem right at the beginning of that journey. And if you think about the whole marketing funnel, awareness, consideration, purchase, and sort of loyalty phases, for me, what I often talk to businesses about in that first stage is a couple of things. One is the awareness end of that funnel. So, you're not specifically going to grab anyone from this right now. They're not specifically looking. But if you can position yourself with the audience that you need to be in front of in the places where you know that they are, and keep yourself top of mind, then when that does flip over into a problem, suddenly a consideration of what do I do, how do I solve this problem, you're already top of mind. And the second piece, which does the same thing really, is around communications, and using things like email newsletters, for example, and social media, directs or communities to keep yourself in the conversation at all times. And again, 90% of the time, you're not going to be relevant to people, but when they flip over into that stage 2, you're already there. So I think that's that stage 1 is hard, and you can invest, if you're not careful, a lot of money, which will go down the drain in there. But if you look at the bigger picture and attribute the whole journey to your activity, you can find that tips a lot of people who are moving into stage 2 towards you when it wouldn't otherwise have done. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, one thing I'll say about the first stage is that often the best way to get the attention of those people is by just showing them what's possible.
Yeah.
And this works really well in our industry because we're typically dealing with agency owners and creatives who are in the top of their field, and they've usually been in business or been in their field for a good 15, 20 years as a minimum. They've got into this mindset, they've got into this way of thinking that that's just how things are. Right? That's just how things are. We just pitch for projects and we get some and we don't. Oh, that's just how things are. We always have to bend to the client's needs, and there's always going to be amends, and there's blah, 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 blah. So often what we'll do, and one of the things when we get someone kind of inquiring and saying, how do we work with you, is we'll just tell a story about one of the clients that we've worked with that said, this is some of the things that they were experiencing, and we're going to show you how to get this result without doing these things. And that's why if there's some creative agencies listening, they'll probably be familiar with the book Win Without Pitching by Blair Enns.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the reasons that book got so much traction is because there's a contradiction for most people in the title, Win Without Pitching. It's like most agencies believe that the way to win more work is to pitch for it. And so all of a sudden someone says, here, you can do this thing without doing this thing that you think you have to do to get it. Then all of a sudden you've got someone's attention. So I think stage 1 is probably more about talking to desires and aspirations and bringing in some kind of vehicle or methodology or something that basically challenges beliefs and challenges assumptions about the way they're currently going about that. So, hey, by the way, did you know you could do this better or do this differently or with less effort or less time or less money? And stage 2 is probably more about leaning on those challenges of, aren't you fed up with X, Y, and Z?
It's interesting storytelling you bring up there is Such a common conversation for me with businesses I work with. I think it's probably the most powerful mechanic in marketing, arguably, but probably. I mean, for me, storytelling. Um, if you think back, just ignoring marketing for a moment, you just think back through time. Storytelling is the reason we know the stories that we know, the reason we know history, the reason we think of characters from history the way we think about them, when probably a lot of them were nothing like what we think about them at all. It's all really comes down to storytelling, and storytelling is a powerful methodology, but also it ticks a box in what I always refer to as reasons to believe. So when you tell someone something, why on earth should they believe you? You need to give them evidence and reasons for that. And what you're saying there, you're talking about those stories, whether it's case studies, whether it's reviews. There's lots of ways, lots of ultimately opportunities that you can capitalize on to give that strength to your message. So it's not just here we are and this is where we solve your problem, but also this is where we've done that before, and this is why you should believe that we can do that. And I think if you can put those pieces together, it just strengthens that moving people along that buying journey with you in mind. Yeah, that's a really good point. So last
Yeah.
question for you. Go on, Matt. You're going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, like,
Yeah,
it's quite nuanced, right? And I think people do miss
yeah,
this. So, I see people using things like case studies and stories, but they do it in a way where it's like, hey, this is Joe. Like, he needed a new website, and this is how he made his awesome website. And people are
mm,
like, okay, cool. I don't care about that story because it doesn't relate to me, and I don't need a new website, right? Whereas
yeah,
if you tell a story relating to someone's goals and you show them a different way of getting it, or you tell a story related to their symptoms and you tell a story about how you help someone relieve those symptoms, that's a totally different piece of marketing. So I just wanted to like build on what you just said, because I think people look at the vehicle of storytelling, on the vehicle of case studies, and they think, oh, I just need to tell more stories or use
yeah.
more case studies. But unless you understand this fundamental concept of like the buying journey and how your message needs to change, what you'll do is you'll spend ages creating case studies about how you build amazing websites for people, and you'll still be in the exact same position where you're getting these people to come to you that want a website for £500 and they're not willing to do X, Y, and Z, and you'll just bang your head against the wall being like, oh, why isn't this working? I've got case studies, I've got stories, and it's because you're just, the messaging and the language that you're using or what you're talking about is talking to stage 4 rather than stage 1 or 2.
It's a great point. It's a great point. Good. Okay. Now, what was I going to say? The last question I was going to ask you was around. We've talked about how important it is to move from trying to attract those stage 4 buyers to those earlier stage 1 and 2 buyers. How do you go out there and find out who this audience are? What advice do you give on? Okay, it's relatively easy to find a stage 4 buyer. They're out there looking. You just need to put yourself in front of them. How do you get yourself in front of a stage 1, 2? What's the research process to try and find this audience? What sort of conversations do you have with people there?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know if it's a quick answer, but I'll tell you the mechanism that we use. So
Sure.
we operate with a principle in our program, especially for people that have been in business for a while or have a decent amount of industry experience. We operate around this principle that everybody is in a unique position to solve a problem for someone. Okay. So like everyone has their niche. Everybody has the problem that they're better at solving than anybody else based on everything that's happened to them up until this point in their life and their business, right? So the people they know, the books they've read, the stuff they geek out on, the stuff they do in their spare time, all of that is basically like a combination which is pointing you in a direction to a particular problem that you're positioned to solve. Often these are problems that we've already solved for ourselves in some way, or they're just a unique insight we have based on those experiences. So the first step is figuring out who those people are and what that problem is. And we actually go through a process where we go back through people's lives and we look at the highs and the lows and pull out the themes, and we kind of look, we think this is where you should be focusing your efforts in terms of kind of niching down, and these are the kind of people that you should be helping. And what's interesting is once you know who that person is, the next part of finding out what those problems are becomes much easier, because really all we're doing is we're just going out and building relationships with those people. And if you've done this process right, in terms of kind of unpacking everything and really figuring out who that person is, they're usually people who are already in your world, who are already in your network, and you actually want to be friends with. And this was a very transformational thing for me in my business. I built an agency years ago, and it looked amazing from the outside. I was traveling the world. I was doing all these cool things, posting these photos on Instagram, but behind the scenes, I was pretty miserable because I had left a job with one boss and built a business where I now felt like I had 20. And I just didn't really like many of my clients, and they were all stage 4 buyers, and they all wanted it for half price and all of that stuff. And so when I made that transition to actually working with people that I enjoyed and that I actually wanted to hang out with and wanted to spend time with, it became so much easier to really understand the nuances of their challenges and their goals and basically everything about them and everything you teach in Marketing 101, because I liked them and I was hanging out with them and I was actually getting to know them as people. And then that part of, oh, that's interesting, I heard you talk about that. Would you be open to a strategy that we've just used with a client that stopped them getting feast and famine or stopped them getting undercharging or whatever? And you're just there in that world, immersed with those people, and it just kind of becomes easy.
Yeah, that's nice. That's a nice story. Yeah, I think I have. I'm very blessed actually. In my company, I think touch wood so far we've got lots of wonderful clients, and some of whom are good friends. So it changes. It really does change things dramatically. But I know what you mean about the one boss to 20 bosses thing. I've been there, so I know exactly. You think you're going in for a life of freedom, and suddenly you find out, there's actually a lot more people judging than you ever had before.
Yeah,
All right, look, Matt,
100%.
it's been amazing. It's been really great conversation. So anyone out there running a creative agency or services business that would benefit from Matt's wisdom, and I think there's a lot of wisdom there, and there's some great models and insights and experience that you've got there, Matt. So you're the founder of Creative Life. So anyone running a creative agency, go out there, speak to Matt. I'm sure he and his business will be able to help you out. And in the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe to For the Love of Marketing. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks very much, Matt.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Simon.
Cheers.